Hi, this is Elizabeth and Elton with Brightside Global Trade. We are at Brightside Club on Zoom. We had a wonderful presentation with Colonel Donna Ford, and we had these two wonderful people from Hawaii. And now we are here with Blythe, and she's going to tell us about our mental state. So go ahead.
Well, first of all, it's an honor to be here. I had no idea what to expect. And as people have said, it's very supportive and enlightening. And thank you to everyone for your service. My father was a Korean War vet. He passed away in 2012. And he was in the Air Force as well. And I actually live here in New Mexico, not Mexico. A lot of people think I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I live right by an Air Force base. And I hear the planes all the time, and I hear taps every day at 7 a.m. and 5 p.m., which is really cool. So, veterans are no strangers to trauma. So, as I said in the beginning, my expertise over the years have sort of accumulated like everyone else's here. And I really do focus on trauma, grief, and addictions, which I consider to be sort of the trifecta of pain. Very few of us get through life unscathed, and then those of us who give our lives to service or other things are obviously inducing more trauma, right? And then I also specialize in grief, which is where people can lose anyone and anything, and that's also related to trauma. And then, of course, addictions are often a problem when we have trauma and or grief. So I have written a book. It's called Trauma Intelligence: The Art of Helping in a World Filled with Pain. Similar to the work I do, which is I've been working directly with clients for over 20 years. And I also now do coaching at major companies like Google Health and the Louisiana Department of Health, where I train people on trauma intelligence, what I call trauma intelligence, which is in the book, and on how to respond to not just your big scale PTSD, but just the way that people appear in the workplace and in life through living in a world that is continuously more and more challenging and more difficult. You know, the world has always been difficult, as my mom, who is 87, tells me, but it hasn't always been the case that we're bombarded nonstop with images of things that we can't get out of our heads and images of things that we can't necessarily fix, manage, or control. So that leaves us in the feeling of global and collective helplessness and fear. And so the book really is written, even though I'm an academic and even though I'm, an LCSW MED, I'm a grief recovery specialist, I'm a death midwife. This book is really written for anyone and everyone who wants to understand that trauma is more than just car accidents. It's more than just extreme PTSD. It's about the way we go about living in the world and how we've been affected by everything and everyone around us. And so it takes what I call the five major types of trauma, right? And it breaks them into categories. So I put it into catastrophic trauma, childhood trauma, workplace trauma, ambiguous trauma, which is similar to what everyone's been talking about in terms of, let's say, someone in your life ages and they change before your eyes. Someone in your life gets cancer and there's nothing you can do to help them. Someone in your life has an addiction that's never ending, and or someone in your life gets a brain injury or something of that nature. We get what we call ambiguous grief or trauma, which is it never stops giving and it never stops happening. And so there's no real resolution. And then we talk about collective or communal trauma in the book as well. And then I have five other types of trauma. So for each type of trauma that is in the book, there is a narrative about what it is, how it impacts a person's life. And then there's a follow up chapter on typical ways that shows up in people, and then accommodations you can offer people in your life. A lot of people who are veterans are finding it actually very helpful because it breaks trauma into a language that the people in your life can understand, so that you're not responsible for communicating with them why you might have traumatic responses, why you might think someone is shooting at you when they're potentially not, why you might have nightmares or wake up with a gun in your living room and not know why. And so it helps for people around you to understand you better as well. So it's not just for you to understand yourself, but it's really for the people in your lives that care about you the most, that want to accommodate you in a way that makes sense. Just like we accommodate someone who's in a wheelchair, or we accommodate someone who has a very obvious disability. I truly believe that healing ourselves, healing our own pain, healing our own trauma, and also being attentive to the people around us is a collectivist act. right? Similar to what we're doing here tonight. And that it's super important for us to do everything we can to understand what people are going through, especially now young people as well. This is a very, 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 very difficult time to be a child or a young person. I can't imagine what it must feel like. And so, for those of you who are fathers or grandmothers or grandfathers and have people in your life that you want to understand better, this can be helpful too. So, and as I think they said, I do one-on-one clients, I do corporate trainings, I do trainings for nonprofits, I do regular trainings for a homeless rehoming shelter here, where a lot of the people who are unhoused are veterans. As you know, we know that's a chronic problem, and so I work with the staff here on their own secondary trauma and how to be responsive to people who are not only unhoused but also dealing with mental illness and addiction on top of that. So this is my passion. Anyone I can help, I have a passion for. And you know, if you're suffering or you know someone who's suffering who I could benefit, I'd certainly be honored to do so. So that's my. I know I only had a few minutes, so that's my presentation for tonight.
That's incredibly powerful, Blythe. I mean, it's so apropos. We live in such a, what do you say, emergency, urgent times, and so a lot of the times we don't think in terms of those matters. I mean, I picked up a book once by it's called how to handle 10 things that you may need to have to face in an urgent matter. Well, one of the things that it said described was, what do you do if you're kidnapped? Or what do you do if you're on an airplane that's having an emergency event, or any kind of transportation? Now, you have just put into context the idea that you should think consistently above head in terms of having to deal with traumatic circumstances. You can't, this is no time to melt down. There's no time to grab your hair. This is a time that you really have to engage your thinking and your mind to plausibly find conclusions and solutions that could have valid condition. Amazing. It's an amazing context.
Yeah, I can't wait to read the book. I really can't. And a lot of people do not understand that they've had a trauma experience, because we're just not in the culture to go to a specialist to solve an issue. And I think what happens, again, this comes to retirement. When you have more time on your hands, you start going back to the pain, because when you're busy and you're active and you're doing so much, you don't even think about a situation that you're in, a traumatic situation. So I think the book is an eye-opener, a must-have for everyone. We'll put it on our reading list. We're doing Father's Day, and I can put it up for our reading list. But a lot of people are suffering, it's true about the kids. We really have to pray for our.
What was the motivation behind the book? Was that trying to engage the average person into thinking through consequences more legitimately?
Well, this is an interesting story. So a friend of mine posed a question that I should write a book, because I have a pretty robust social media following, and I do a lot of posting, and I love to write. I've written my whole life. And during that time, my sister, who was 62 and an addict, died suddenly. And I just started writing to her, really. And then it became the idea that I would write this book. And the first chapter starts with her death. And then very month I finished writing the book, my best friend died of cancer. And she was a writer. She was 52. And, they're sort of bookends on a voice that wasn't given to them. Their lives were cut short, as it can happen to any of us. And so it's really been a miracle and a gift to be able to sort of have a space and a voice that you can share.
Sounds like you're the voice. You're the voice.
And I'm very grateful for that, because my friend who died actually always wanted to write a book. And so I'm working with both of them on a spiritual level, I believe. And so it's a gift. And I do want to say two quick things. I'm very excited I'm going to be working with an organization that promotes mental health and suicide prevention for firefighters, actually, which I'm excited about, because there's a huge, as everyone knows, with first frontline workers. There's a huge crisis and a trauma going on.
Uh-huh.
And then the other thing I just wanted to say is that I have to say that I can attest that the long-term care insurance is a really good thing, because my dad actually invested in it for many, many years, and my mom would not be taken care of had he not done that. So
Yeah.
she has
Wow.
actually, at 80, she got long story, but she got sepsis. She was totally independent till she was 80, and it was a freak accident that most people die from. She's
Uh-huh.
87, and she hasn't been able to, be on her own totally. She lives in her own home still because he paid for that. But she has actually been well cared for, and it never ends because he invested for so long. So I can attest to all those who presented about that it actually is a viable and real and very beneficial thing, because we would be in a world of hurt had he not done that. So
Wow.
Wow.
yeah,
So I
she could
want,
stay in her home. So that, I just wanted to say thank you for those presentations as well.
thank you, thank you. So one more question. I mean, because I never think about what a nurse has to.
We are
Emergency room
very
nurse.
pet friendly,
Yeah,
so don't
yeah.
worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah, we
I
are very
I
pet
never
friendly.
think of what an emergency room nurse has to face and deal with on a
Yes.
regular daily basis. Because they're in the regular daily moment to moment mode of urgent emergency. What do I do? I mean, what do I do? How do I handle these circumstances? What's my next course of action? And what can I really expect to happen here? Big deal.
Absolutely. Emergency nurses, our teachers are in an acute state of crisis, because not only are you dealing with so much trauma from the children and the parents, but now you have to be afraid that you're going to have to defend people at school and then get blamed that the door was locked, it wasn't locked properly, and all you're doing is trying to be a good person and a good teacher.
Mhm.
And firefighters, police officers are certainly struggling. I mean, the reputation management that they're having to do for the people that are good cops is palpable, and there's just so many areas of people that need support.
Wow. Good.
Harold had a question. Harold, we can't hear you. Turn
You
it.
gotta unmute. You gotta unmute, Harold.
Yeah. Wow. I thought.
Okay,
Yeah. Go ahead.
okay. As a chaplain at the hospital, um, uh, uh, when the COVID and everything else started breaking out, and also when other things were going on, our main goal at one time, our main focus was on patients. And then after the COVID took place, our our direction, I won't say changed, but it included other things. And that thing was the employees. It was the doctors and the nurses and all things. So we go all out to do additional things to go through their different wards, different nursing stations. Every couple of months, twice a month, we go through. We have something called tea for the soul, and all it is a cart with hot tea and everything on it. And what it does is break the monotony of the day.
Yeah.
Because they have been pushed, they have been they're having to do 8 hours, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, as opposed to, I think it used to be 8 and 8 or whatever it used to be. But some of the older ones have quit, and some of the younger ones who can't deal with things have gone on, and so it really leads to a lot of pressure and a lot of anxiety in the hearts of those who are there. And I love the word you use when you said it's your ministry, and you're meeting them on a spiritual level, because that's what it takes. And so as you meet these people, we also had another session, what we call blessing of the hands. And we go through and we wash their hands and use a little oil if they wanted oil, and we pray over their hands. We have security police who are there. We have the workers who do other things, housekeeping and everything else. But what we've done has really broken the monotony of all those different things that are going on throughout the day. And so we as chaplains, like I said, many times we put on blinders and will only look at, the patients, when there's so much more involved. And I really appreciate and like the book and the things that you're doing because you are helping and letting them know that they care. I mean, that you care, and that people care about them.
Yeah.
And so
Thank
it's
you so
great.
much, Harold. That's so nice. And I love what you're doing as well.
Thank you.
We get phone calls all the time in the middle of the night where people say they were about to commit suicide and they saw the show and all of us smiling and everything, and
Yeah.
then they decided to change their mind. And when I first got a call like that, I was shocked because I
Yeah.
didn't know how to react. And then I've had them recover and come on our show. So it's amazing what technology is doing because people are surfing the internet, and I get a lot of these strange phone calls, and I've sometimes been on the phone for 3 or 4 hours trying to calm people down and send them to 911 and say this is not my responsibility. But we've had a lot of those calls, especially during COVID, during the pandemic, and people watching me smiling and all kinds of things. But now I have you, so I can refer them to you. Yeah, but we've had a lot of these calls. We've even had a 12-year-old that called us in the middle of the night. Of course, we connected with the parent, and now she's written a book because she saw all my book authors. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so
That's awesome.
so a lot of them give us these stories.
So as a tool,
Yeah,
here where your suggestions are, it is important that we spend more time engaging, discussing, and creating some planning mechanisms that will help us think more critically under more pressure. Now, don't be afraid about it. I mean, it's kind of like, you're given $50 and you have to get everything you need in 5 minutes from the grocery store.
yeah, I know.
I mean, that's an awkward way to describe it, but imagine if you had to do such a thing. And not because, but it's sometimes you have to think of the critically important items that you'll have to deal with. And you have to use some kind of condition that, is important for you to come up with the right conclusion or solution.
Yeah.
And so, because it could be offering some life-threatening consequences.
Yeah.
And so that just, I mean, I haven't gotten it or read the book, but just in your description, it has informed me that we need to be more proactive.
Yes, we
and
do.
more engaging. And I mean,
And the book's on its way to you, so it should be there any day now.
Thank you.
So even when you're talking to
Still here is slow.
But we wanted to also ask you, what is your opinion on what's going on? I mean, we've looked at Will Smith during the Oscars. I mean, this is a celebrity thing, Amber and Johnny Depp. But do you think that people during COVID have just, exploded with wanting to talk about how they
They're all
feel?
chiming in. I think COVID has definitely been sort of a challenge. I mean, for lack of a better term, like a spiritual break for a lot of people, right? We had a way of living. We were very used to sort of getting whatever we want, whenever we want it, doing whatever we want to do, whenever we want to do it. And we've been subjected to a lot of things that are making us challenge our beliefs, right? Challenge what we feel, challenge our relationships, challenge our values. I mean, there's a reason lots of people are not going back to work because they were being taken advantage of in their work environments. And so there's a reason people are re-questioning their marriages. There's a reason people are leaving the medical field in droves. There's a reason teachers are retiring early with or without a pension. People are really both. I think many people used it or were able or had the privilege rather to use it as a time to reflect and go in a new direction. And most people don't have that privilege, and most of us don't have that option. And so most people went into some sort of fight or flight. And I think we're being challenged as a country too, because again, we're used to living the illusion that nothing is ever going to happen to us. Well, as we know with grief and trauma, that thing that we're all a phone call away from a totally different life, that old fashioned saying is a very true thing. Anything can happen to anyone at any time. And so I think that culminating with the violence, the gun violence that is just getting worse and worse, the racial violence that is only seems to be incited more and more, and it's horrifying and terrifying.
Mhm.
And I think that people are snapped. A lot of people have snapped, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
I have no idea anything about Will Smith's story. I have no idea what happened to him, but you know, people are displaying aggression in ways where they're losing that that moment between thought and action. And in terms of, you had mentioned that in your email too, the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp thing. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there was
yeah,
too much
because
information.
I mean, if you look at trauma, it's very, very evident to anyone who is a professional that both of those people have endured an exponential amount of trauma and abuse as children.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
And as a lot of people probably know, that usually we find things that are familiar as we grow up. And so people who are trauma survivors as children find other abusers. And so, you know, the fact that we always look for someone to blame rather than saying this is actually a very sad story of two really sick
Right.
people who
Mhm.
may look pretty on the outside, but they're both really suffering.
Yeah.
That is sort of probably the truth of what happened. But we all want to have camps and blame and make fun of and do jokes, which is really a huge problem. I mean, if
Sure. Sure.
we can't have empathy, all of us, I myself included, have chosen unhealthy relationships at some point in our lives. If you had any childhood trauma, so to judge that critically instead of having a humanitarian lens and go, wow, rich and pretty people are sad too,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes.
And
Mm.
they don't
Exactly.
feel worth anything either,
Sure,
and
sure.
they let people
Right.
abuse them too. Money doesn't make you
No,
feel
no, no,
worthwhile.
doesn't.
So
Mm.
I think that's the lens I would go for that on. Yeah.
No, you know, now as you raise a point, and when you're in a urgent and stress condition, and you have to devise a plan, and the plan for strategy of how to overcome, how to meet the challenge and survive. It comes down to, I think you also have to be realistic, keep your
Right.
feet on the ground, because at the end of the day, I heard a song recently and it's just been resonating with me. It says, the name of the song is Easier Said Than Done. I
Yep.
mean,
And
when you,
so the other thing to remember with this couple is that they have the financial resources to leave and do all those things.
Right.
The vast majority of people who are in these types of relationships have no resources, and they have 4 children and they don't get the choice to leave. And then we grow up and then blame our parents for not doing enough when they didn't have any choices. So, they have the luxury of being public, even though it's probably very hard. That's probably a very hard thing.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people in those kinds of relationships don't have resources, and they don't get to leave.
Well, I'm so glad you've written this book, and I'm so glad, and I hope that we can, with our channel, and try to create an awareness for this, because the first step to getting cured is to be aware that
Yeah.
you have a condition, and not, be able to be humble enough to accept it. So
And
I
not
think
be
that's
ashamed of it.
important.
Not be
Yeah.
ashamed
No,
of it.
no, also when you're facing things like this, you have to understand, now there's something I can do. I do have options,
You do.
and I have to find the most plausible, reasonable, and specific options that are at my disposal to get the best result. And
That's
then if
right.
you're thinking in those terms and you come up with a few scenarios that could work, and I mean, I always look at, okay, which is the least condition, which is the best condition, and which is the one that I could probably without issue secure.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
And I want to make sure everyone here knows, because everyone here I know is super busy and has this is very quick read, and it's very practical. It's a practical it's not an intellectual exercise, and it's not a self-help book. It's a really practical tool. And I've had people everywhere from 12 years old and up read it. So I will say, though, if you're going to have a child read it, you need to be there with them, because there's, especially the childhood trauma chapter, there's some really kind of
Yeah.
hard things. But I mean, it's practical. It makes sense. It's not some cerebral intellectual exercise in what trauma is. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
great.
you so much
Thank
for
you so
having
much. We won't forget you.
And we
I mean,
bring
I
you-
can Blythe, I know Blythe Banner.
Yeah.
That's the only person I know with the name Blythe,
That's right.
Yeah.
I actually had a boss with the name Blythe. So
Okay.
yeah.
She was nice, but
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so
So,
much.
okay,
Blythe.
thank you so
Appreciate
much.
you.
You're
And
watching
thank you so much.
Brightside
And
Global
we'll move
Trade.
forward with
If you buy her books,
Yes, yes.
snap a
we,
picture
we're gonna have
and
her
let
back.
us know.
We'll
And
have
we'll
her back.
definitely have her back
Right,
because
right.
we need more
Right,
time
right,
with
right,
you.
right. So,
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay.